what time is this place, right? The issue of time was the absolutely important issue that architect had to deal with. This is how he explained the subject of the book. The book deals with time, and as it manifests itself in the physical reality of the world, with the way its external science corresponds or not to our internal experience of time, and with the means of making this external-internal relationship more satisfying and more stimulating. It thus browses through issues ranging from historical preservation to different forms of transition, including futurism, the marks of time, the aesthetics of time, biological rhythm, the perception of time, disasters, resources, and revolution, right? Architects, designers are working in space-time, not just in space, right? And this was, at that time, a very important message, you know, and he would refer to Ovid's metamorphosis right in the beginning of the text. We are, in a way, operating metamorphosis in this space-time matrix, and this is absolutely essential. The idea of the book, he said, is that the quality of their personal image of time is crucial for the well-being of individuals, as for the success of the efforts we make to master the transformation or the evolution of our environment. And also that our material environment actually plays a role in the building and maintaining of this image of time. The relation is thus reciprocal. So, no better ways of explaining that we are living in a kind of milieu, you know, of space, time. And he would look, you know, in the same way, illustrating several transformation issues of preservation, where one given city, such as Bath, for instance, is prisoner in its past, right? While others are completely neglected ancient potteries at that time. Going through Boston, which was his own ecological niche at the MIT, and you know, browsing all the signs of the inscription of time in the city, whether historical, whether, you know, gaps between buildings built in very different periods, etc., etc.
The title of this text is called Patterns and Material Surfaces. Some thoughts on the architectural position of the office Zijnstra van Gelderen. If one would characterize our work and our office, there are a number of topics that we find particularly important for our practice. A concept or narrative that sometimes steers the design is one of them. Dutch architecture and design, as it developed during the 1990s, showed a strong focus on concept. Its results were inventive, bold, challenging, funny, and sometimes all of this together. At the same time, and especially when looking back at this architecture that was quite successful, also internationally, it is not difficult to see its weaker points. The Dutch architecture and design tended to become too diagrammatic, ignoring the specific qualities that are related to the architectural handling of materials, to building tectonics, and to issues like surface treatment and detailing. So one can say that in its ambition to be inventive, it ignored the convention as a way to relate to history. In its ambition to be bold, it ignored the subtle and ambiguous layers that good architecture reveals. In its ambition to be challenging, it ignored the less spectacular, but in the end maybe more satisfying connection to the ordinary and the everyday environment. And in its ambition to be funny, it forgot that the joke will lose its freshness, will become worn out after a while, especially for the people that are confronted with it on a daily basis.
Here we have an example of the extreme. We have two extremes of the hotelless terms. Where this is the room area and this is the bath and equipment area. So the intensity of architecture is very high because you know that 1 square meter of this is very, very, very expensive in comparison with 1 square meter of this. So here maybe is only 1 person or 2 person at maximum with 2 VCs, 1 bathroom complete, 1 kitchen. So it's a lot of equipment for only 2 person and maybe 1. So when you look at the plan of the building, you count the quantity of square meters used by this intensity of architecture with a lot of fixing and equipment and a lot of very expensive and complicated things. Well, it's a really complicated and very complex building.
The project I'm presenting tonight, I've presented several times in several places, and I realized today, or a few days ago, that maybe this is the first time I presented again in one same place. My apologies to those of you who already saw the presentation or the exhibition that took place here 2 years ago, I think. I hope that the update that I will add to it, that I've added to it, makes sense to you too, but I found it impossible to break from its original, let's say, fundamentals and to explain the argument and the ideas that are behind the work of these collective work around the idea of reclaiming heritage, in particular materials, heritage materials. I will, as I say, it's hard to depart from your origins, and this is my origin. I come originally from Chile, this crazy land at the edge of the Pacific in South America, crazy in many ways, and maybe the craziest of them all is that we were this close to beating Brazil this year, but we do have a world record, and that is on earthquakes. It's not clear, but it's clear enough that it was above 9 degrees Richter, the earthquake of 1960, that hit the charts and made it to be the biggest ever registered. In 2010, we had another top 5 in the south of Chile, in Concepcion, also southern city just as Valdivia is, that made it 8.8. For you who are also a earthquake-prone country, more or less know that the magnitude of these events is really beyond imagination, and you can only live to understand and to tell what it is like. So I trust your own experiences help you to follow this argument. What this means in the particular case of Chile, and this is where we departed from, is that the earthquakes, well, obviously destroy architecture. And that's, I think, an interesting problem, a different challenge. In particular, in a relatively poor country still, like Chile is, what happens is that we have very little infrastructure, very little money to protect heritage architecture. And above all, this heritage architecture that is not a monumental one, but that is a more humble heritage. So what happens to little villages as this one, San Lorenzo in Tarapacá, in the desert north of Chile, with the earthquake of 2005, that is more or less a routine earthquake for our country, for our standards, is this. So believe it or not, these are the same street before and after the earthquake. And the whole city, the whole village, here you see in a before and after comparison. This is, of course, a very regrettable loss. Our country deals very problematically with these, or rather doesn't deal with these phenomena at all, and has very little resources to cope with this loss. So that was our first challenge, our first contention in this project, and that as I said, we addressed from a distance from Berlin with a group of basically European students under my supervision that eventually evolved into what I will show you in a second.
This evening, what I want to share with you are some reflections out of a book we published last year with a few colleagues from University College of London, which is called Planning Risk and Property Development. But the title we wanted to give to the book was what's on top of this slide: By the Market, For the Market, with a question mark. The editor didn't want that. Planners are not always very imaginative people. The editor said we need something that's clear about what you're doing in the book. So, well, okay, we wanted to publish it, so we agreed. But I used this opportunity to get back to this initial title again, because how do you say it? It's a bit the issue we want to address, and I'll explain how. Yeah, just one short remark. So, as a planner, I think one of the fundamental differences between planners and architects is that planners use text in PowerPoint presentations, whereas architects only use images. So I have a few slides with text. I hope you can work your way through it, and the images will come quite soon. So the starting point for our reflection is summarized here in a few points. Over the last 2 decades, there is a growing importance in European countries, growing attention to the regeneration of the existing city, the urban renaissance in the UK, all European cities agree on the fact that we can't continue to spread all the time for different reasons, and there's a lot of vacant land in the cities that we need to regenerate. So a growing importance for what they call brownfield regeneration. At the same time, an increasing level of quality required in these projects under the influence of sustainable development, for example, environmental requirements, requirements as to the quality of public space, of the realization of social housing. And at the same time, an increasing reliance on market mechanisms to produce these projects. And we speak a lot about property-led urban regeneration. The property market, in a way, what you do in an urban project is also produce real estate that's sold on a market, and if you don't manage to sell it, you don't have a project. So these things together result in a situation in which there is a sort of a field of tension between, at the one hand, we have to create value in order to attract private investors to realize urban projects. And at the other side, we've got our public objectives in terms of social housing, in terms of quality of public space, in terms of facilities to be realized, in terms also of design quality of the areas. And how to deal with that field of tension. It's a bit the question we asked in the book, and we wanted to study we have studied several big regeneration projects in European countries in order to see how they dealt with this field of tension. Now, how did we study these projects? We used quite a basic sort of analytical framework, saying an urban project has a few central components. It's made in the interaction between a few components. The first one is the context. The context of a project influences what you can realize. So the second component of a project are its contents, expressed in structure, in form, in design, in the use of the uses that are there, the mix of tenure, in facilities. And there is a third component which is important, which is the organization of the project. A project is not just an interaction between a context and so what do? We look at the context and the project just emerges. A project emerges in the interaction between these three components. And depending on the type of governance, the partnership structure, the way in which risks are being dealt with, the contents of the project will not be the same and the organization depends on the context, but also influences the context. There are mutual interactions between all these three components, and a project emerges in these interactions.
We live at the dawn of a new world. Our children's, your children's actually, will live in hybrid cities. The nature becomes the object of desire. But beside those clichés, nature is dynamic, and probably the most visible of those dynamics is water. So we will actually, those two images are the same. I just get that in my bat trip 10 minutes ago. So you don't need special 3D glasses, it's the same image, but you probably get it. So let's travel together through this new world and try to understand the new strategies and the new alliance between nature, or what we call nature, and urban cities. This image is not a mushroom, it's the Yukon Delta in the Bering Sea, very north of Canada. The permafrost is melting each day and creating new rivers. This is not a piece of art, this is in the Pacific Ocean. It's called Taioyo Belt, means the Pacific Belt. It's a mega city of 105 million people in Japan. In the middle you have Tokyo. We have mega city, resilient mega city during the night, with artificial coast who been attacked in a way by typhoons, by tsunami and by earthquakes. This is in India or in Bangladesh, just in the middle of the two, because it's the biggest delta in the world. The Gange River and the Brahmaputra River are going there, and 140 million people are living there. But the new climate changes, the erosion of the coast because of agriculture, intense agriculture, create sunken phenomenon, and all the delta is going down in the sea. 105 million kilometers square under the sea level. Calcutta and Dhaka cities. We are more and more than 20 years ago, and we are more exposed. This is in Philippines, a few months ago, maybe before an episode of, I don't know, The Mentalist on the TV, you probably see this. Katrina hurricane cost 200 million of euro. Fukushima, 140 million of euro, and probably change the nuclear position in Japan, and I hope in the world. We are constantly immersed in images with very powerful nature, who push, who destroy, and reinvent our geography. The art and the fictions are feeding our fantasies. We, architects, are feeding the fantasies. In the movies, actually now, it's the great thing, the eco-fictions. In the movies, we have three different attitudes. The first one, like in this movie, Take Shelter, it's the contagious psychos in America for Black Storm. You probably see Black Storm, the new one, but this one is more intimate. The second attitude, it's this kind of movie, Oblivion. Oblivion events invents a new geography, an hybrid urban system landscape based on the nostalgia of Eden. The nature wins, Gaia theory. The third attitude, the beast from south. The movie is in the middle of Mississippi burned by Katrina. Told a completely different story, told that actually only not the brave or not the richer or not the heroes, but those who learn to live with water could survive. Back to architects. Politicians and architects, landscape urbanists, promise today to the cities and to the people who live in the cities the dream of a lost nature. This is in Punggol, in Singapore. Just a small thing. I will present you very quickly 23 projects. On those 23 projects, 17 are real, on the table, signed by a client, and some of them are in process. Okay, so it's not utopic. That's important. I just show you 3 images from the movies.
I would say 2 little short stories, which you can watch on either screen, because it's going to be the same. We know that cities operate and are understood at different scales, from the largest scale of the region to the scale of the human being. New York City, like I think all cities, can be described and understood by examining its various scales. So my first short story will be to talk about these, what I've identified as 7 different scales. The first scale was produced in 1922 by a civic and business leaders of New York City, an organization that called itself the Committee on the Regional Plan of New York and its Environs. It was a group of people of which Lewis Mumford is perhaps one of the most important as we know today, and was continuously involved in this organization. It wasn't a government organization. It started as this committee. It was concerned with what they called the metropolitan region, which was a fairly new term. It involved 3 states, so it overlapped the kind of jurisdiction of 3 different governments, New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. And it described itself as being involved in the area that's a 50-mile radius from Times Square, which is obviously very city-centric and maybe a little bold to feel that New York City is the center of a 50-mile radius. But it gave them a territory to look at. And they looked at the regional needs specifically for New York City, water, transportation, open space, urban and suburban growth, the things that we still do today. Out of that, the Regional Plan Association was formed in 1929, and they produced the first regional plan.
Because the question is not only the scale, but the time of the new places, in which way we are using the city. That is not only a human time, but it also is a time of nature. As we know, the problem of New York now is facing with a very important issue regarding the climate change. So the time of the nature that for the first time is dealing with the time of the city and is dealing with the time of the citizens. So that could be a new content for our way to face the different scale of the city, the different pattern of the city.
Yes, in part, and part of the Red Hook and Guanas Canal. I saw some of of your students, Antonella, is working on the Guanas Canal still, and then all the part of the East River and the Lower Manhattan here, of course, New Jersey. But this is John, and this is for the lower side of Manhattan when he was trying to say, okay, there were different approaches. After Sandy, there were all this for months. There were meetings and exhibitions, and I was part of some of those meetings and exhibitions, try to see what is the future of the city. And the AIA, the Architectural Association of New York, organized those things, a workshop with, and what was interesting in those workshops had kind of a multidisciplinary presence. So we have engineering and landscape architect and economists working all together for weeks trying to understand what could be the future. Should we build a high wall against the water, or should we be more kind of let the water come in and trying to direct one in the way we can and trying to collect and perhaps reuse. I think this second one was the approach that was strongly recommended. And
vediamo che cos'è una forma topologica. Una forma topologica può essere definita come un'entità descrivibile con una sequenza di valori contigui piuttosto che con una serie di valori discreti. In queste due figure vedete due curve che hanno pressoché lo stesso profilo. La prima è composta da un insieme di elementi geometrici semplici e discreti come archi di circonferenza e linee rette, mentre la seconda è un'unica curva che viene chiamata spline. Per chi è familiare con il disegno digitale sicuramente avrà più volte incontrato questo tipo di curva. La prima delle due curve non può essere descritta con un'unica equazione, ma ogni segmento ha un'equazione differente e pertanto non è possibile manipolare globalmente l'oggetto, ma punto per punto e in maniera indipendente rispetto agli altri settori possiamo modificare la conformazione, ma non diciamo della curva nella sua interezza. La spline invece è definita da un'unica curva e la manipolazione dei parametri e delle variabili di questa curva ci consente di modificarne. La matematica può quindi descrivere l'apparizione di strutture e patterns come quelli che vedete in questa immagine, che rappresentano il risultato di una reazione chimica chiamata Reaction Diffusion System.
E cerca di cambiare la conformazione delle bolle è la volontà di forma, la volontà di trasmettere qualcosa, che è profondamente imparametrizzabile. Non è possibile parametrizzare la volontà di comunicazione. Perché Goethe diceva tutto è natura, il contro natura.
Of course, I have different projects in the office, but as a landscape architect, it's very important what is your biographical background. So for you as architects, it's much easier to work in China, in the Middle East, in Russia, wherever. For a landscape architect, it's not only the different trees, it's a different climate, and it's a different culture. So today, the worldwide architecture is much more rooted on a common understanding what architecture is. So, I mean, high-risers looking in London the same as in Singapore, but landscape is different. And for me, to talk with architectural students, it's also coming from this background of the Alps, but then we are, of course, planning this kind of landscapes where you have tropical vegetation. That was a project for the zoo in Zurich, an ecosystem hall about the rainforest in Mazoala in Madagascar, where we imported all these tropical plants. Then here, for instance, a small courtyard in Zurich where we got a prize from a Natural Conservation Society, but they didn't realize that here is a car parking underneath and there's only 80 centimeters of soil for this birch tree. So they didn't realize it's super artificial. It's only the image looks like nature. And here again, it's for the FIFA, for the World Football Club Association. They wanted to have different vegetation from all 5 continents. So in this courtyard, we We propose Northern American rainforest where it can have frost and very cold. And of course, people really believe that this dam, 3 meters wide, is really nature, but they have park underneath. You don't realize they don't bring the architecture together with their own car parking place. So it's out of concrete and it's super artificial. But I know many people working there for 5 years, they still believe that these trunks are
I
real.
think that was interesting, the last question of Sebastian about politics, because I was thinking also to the first image of your presentation, was the Mark Tansey view of the cowboys-like people looking towards the Robert Smithson Spiral Jetty. That was a description, I think, in my opinion, was an idea of representation of a conflict of different worlds that stay together in a strange place, belonging to different cultures, to different countries, different point of views, are like a crossing of point of views that cannot cross in a way, no difference of time and a splitting of different times in the same place. I don't know, a place like that, a play like that. And when I see your Alps border, that is very provocative, in my opinion, very, very strong gesture to imagine the Alps as a nation or as a whole, as something that is independent from the political borders, from the different languages, from the different histories, from different climates. So in that drawing, I think that there is a very strong geophysical definition, but also in potential a very strong geopolitical idea, in a way. Also an aesthetical idea, because a nation is something that has also an aesthetic point of view of in front of the world, in front of the nature, in front of the city, etc. So in some way that for me was very interesting, but I did not understand what is the political enjeu, the question, the political question and the aesthetical question that you see beside this image that is the starting point of a project. It is a projectual image, no? Can you say something about that, something more?
Yes, the first image, Robert Smithson is talking about geological time, so some million years, and Mark Tansey showing these Indians is talking about the last 200 years. So, and it's but it's the same landscape somehow, and it's I think it's important, especially this land art today. Many people are still saying, yeah, it's land art, but land art stopped in 1973 when Robert Smithson and Gordon Matta Clark died. So it was a specific art in a specific time, and I think we shouldn't talk today about land art. But there it's really about a culture of the American culture. And here, when I'm talking about the Alps, for me, it's a cultural landscape. That's the most important thing. We should forget, and of course, coming from Switzerland, it's a bit provocative, and I say Switzerland is not part of the European Union.